The American period. It is the period where the Philippines is under the influence of the American colonization of Philippines. The Spanish-American War, which started in Cuba, changed the history of Philippines. May 1, 1898, Americans led by U.S. Navy Admiral George Dewey with Emilio Aguinaldo attacked the Spanish Navy in the Manila Bay. Treaty of Paris. The Spanish-American War, which started in Cuba, changed the history of the Philippines. On May 1, 1898, the American led by U.S. Navy Admiral George Dewey in the participation of Emilio Aguinaldo attacked the Spanish Navy in Manila Bay, faced the defeat that Philippines was ceded to the United States by Spain in 1898 after the payment of $20 million to Spain in accordance with the Treaty of Paris ending the Spanish-American War. So how did the Spanish-American War affect the Philippines? After the defeat in the Spanish War of 1898, Spain ceded its long-standing colony of the Philippines of the United States in the Treaty of Paris. As many as 200,000 Filipino civilians dead from violence, famine, and disease. On June 12, 1898, Filipino led by Emilio Aguinaldo declared Independence Day. This declaration was opposed by the U.S., who has planned taking over the colony, and this led guerrilla was against the Americans. On June 12, so after the 13 years of Spanish rule, on June 12, he proclaimed Philippine independence as established a provincial government, of which subsequent became head. His rebels meanwhile had encircled the Spanish in Manila, and with the support of Dewey's squadron in Manila Bay, would surely have conquered the Spanish. The Philippine-American War, 1898-1946. Hostilities broke out on February 4, 1999, after two American privates on patrol, 3 Filipino soldiers in San Juan, a Manila suburb. This incident sparked the Philippines-American War, which would cost far more money and took far more lives than the Spanish-American War. Some 126,000 American soldiers will be committed to the conflict, 4,223 Americans dead, as did 16,000 Filipino soldiers who were part of a nationwide guerrilla movement in determinate numbers. At least 34,000 Filipinos lost their lives as direct results of the war, and as many as 200,000 may have died as a result of the cholera epidemic at the war's end. Atrocities were committed by both sides. This is the following events that happened during the Philippine-American War in 1898-1946. On February 4, 1899, the hostilities broke out after the two American privates killed 3 Filipino soldiers in San Juan, Manila suburb. Ang pangyayaring ito ay naging dahilan kung bakit nagsimula ang Philippine-American War, which cost huge money and took more lives than the Spanish-American War. 126,000 of American soldiers committed to the conflict, or 4,234 ang mga namatay. Humigit kumulang na 2 taon ang digmaan batay sa statistika. 4,234 ang sundalong Amerikano at 16,000 ang sundalong Pilipino ang nasawi sa digmaan, na pinamumunuan ni General Antonio Luna. Ang mga sundalong Pilipino sa pagkikipaglaban sa Manila, ngunit sila ay natalo sa Amerikano. Dahil din sa lakas ng puwersa at armas ng Amerikano ay madali nilang nalusob ang maraming lugar sa Maynila at ang mga karatig lalawigan nito. Isinunod nila ang kupkop sa kabisera ng pamalaang revolusyonaryo sa Malolos, Bulacan noong March 30, 1899 na kung saan umatras ang grupo ni Aguinaldo. Sa mga Pilipinong sundalo na parte ng nationwide guerrilla movement of intermediate numbers, 34,000 ang namatay at 200,000 may have died as a result of the cholera epidemic. Aguinaldo dissolved the regular army in November 1899 and ordered the establishment of decentralized guerrilla commands in each several military zones. The revolution was effective ended with the capture 1901 of Aguinaldo by General Frederick Funston of Palanan, Isabela on March 23, 1901 and was brought to Manila. The plight of the guerrilla force in the Philippines during World War III. The Philippine-American War 1898-1946. Free trade, established by an Act of 1909, was extended in 1913. Influence of the uselessness of further resistance. He swore allegiance to the United States and issues a proclamations calling on his patriots to lay down their arms, officially bringing an end to the war. However, sporadic insurgent resistance continued in various parts of the Philippines, especially in the Muslim South, until 1913. U.S. colony. Civil government was established by the American in 1901. English declared the official language. 600 American teachers were imported abroad. The USS Thomas. Catholic Church was disestablished and substantial amount of church land was purchased and distributed. An elected Filipino legislature was established in 1907. Consequence of the American colonial rule. During the Spanish period, the Spaniard had given enormous land properties to the Catholic Church. One of the first things that Americans did was to take care of the retribution of these land properties. To do so, they first had to pay an amount of US 7.2 million US dollars to the Vatican in 1904. The small farmers or tenants didn't get any land, however. The land became property of the large landowners. Most of the small farmers couldn't pay to the asked price or couldn't prove that they were the former owners of the land. Next.
Independence. In 1903, 2 years after peace had returned, the first Philippine national census was taken. Tapos 4 years later, noong 1907, national elections were held the members of the lower legislative chamber, the National Assembly. Yung the Philippine Commission, till then the only legislature, ito ay naging upper chamber in the new bicameral Philippine legislative body. So yung mga majority na na-elect sa National Assembly ay tinawag na Nationalist Party or Nationalistas, na yung platform nila ay immediate independence para sa Pilipinas. The National Progressive Party naman ay tinawag na Old Federalist Party or Federalistas. For the next 15 years, simula 1907 hanggang 1922, yung Nationalista Party headed by Sergio Osmeña continued as the majority party. Malinaw na yung immediate independence ang rason kung bakit ang mga nationalists continued as majority party in the government. But it had its shortcomings too. Ang kalayaan ay nagsilbing paraan or tool para sa election kahit ng mga hindi kwalipikadong kandidato. Noong 1914, Tecdor Sandoco formed a third party. Ito ay ang Democrat Party or Democrats. Among those who thought that Osmeña ay masyadong masunurin sa mga American at yung mga nag-charge that the three traditional branches ng government legislative, executive, at judiciary ay hindi na malaya o hindi na free from one another. Then, eto na noong 1916, the Jones Law, provided na makukuha lamang ng Pilipinas ang kalayaan nito kung merong stable na government. So, the law placed executive power sa Gobernador General ng Pilipinas na hinirang ng Pangulo ng Estados Unidos. Ngunit nagtatag ng bicameral Philippine Legislature na papalit sa nahalal na kapulungan ng Pilipinas, Lower House, at hinirang ng Philippine Commission, Upper House, na dati nang nasa lugar. Si Manuel L. Quezon ay na-elect as Senate President while Osmeña remained as Speaker of the House of Representatives. To continue the campaign for Philippine independence, a Commission on Independence was created in 1918. Every year except in 1920, 1921, and 1929, and 1934, the Commission sent an independence mission to the United States to use every legal means to free the country. Lobby before the American Congress, but only one mission obtained concrete results, the Osrock Mission, or headed by Osmeña and Manuel Rojas in 1931 hanggang 1932, which obtained the hair horse-cutting law on Philippine independence. In 1934, the United States Congress na orihinal na naipasa ang Hair Horse Cutting Act bilang isang batas sa kalayaan ng Pilipinas sa pagtanggi ni Pangulong Hoover na ang batas na tinanggihan ng mamabatas ng Pilipinas. Finally, passed a new Philippine Independence Act na mas kilala bilang Tidings-McDuffie. Ang batas na inilaan para sa pagkakaloob ng kalayaan ng Pilipinas noong 1946. Ang Hair Horse Cutting Act na ipinasa ng Congress noong 1932 ay naglaan para sa complete independence of the islands in 1945. After 10 years of self-government sa ilalim ng pangangasiwa ng US, ang panukalang batas ay nalikha sa tulong ng isang komisyon mula sa Pilipinas. Ngunit kinontra ito ni Manuel L. Quezon, the leader of the leading nationalist party, opposed it because of the threat of American tariffs laban sa mga produkto ng Pilipinas. Ngunit higit sa lahat ay dahil sa mga provisions leaving naval bases in US hands. Sa ilalim ng kanyang impluwensya, tinanggihan ng mamabatas na Pilipinas ang panukalang batas. So yung Tidings-McDuffie Independence Act of 1934, 2 weeks later on, January 15, 1934, si Quezon ay nag-present ng proposals na siya ang natasan na mag-submit. Iminungkahi niya either independence within 2 or 3 years na may limitadong free trade or kalakalan sa loob ng 2 or 3 years. Then, President Franklin Roosevelt suggested some kind of compromise. Senator Millard Tydings at Representative John McDuffie of Alabama ay kumonsulta sa mga pinuno ng Pilipinas. Tydings and McDuffie ay nag-sponsor ng isang bill gaya sa hair horse cutting pero sa mga provisions for military reservations ay natanggal. Instead, the new law provided that after independence, both countries work for an ultimate settlement of American naval and refueling stations in the Philippines. Roosevelt approved the new Philippine Constitution a month later, and on May 14, 1935, isang national plebiscite ang nagpatibay dito, isang halalan upang punan ang bagong created Office of President of the Commonwealth of the Philippines ay napalawakan ni Manuel L. Quezon, Nationalista Party, at Filipino government ay nabuo batay sa mga prinsipyong maliwanag na katulad sa US Constitution. So when Quezon was inaugurated on November 15, 1935, the Commonwealth was formally established in 1935, featured a very strong executive, a unicameral National Assembly, and a Supreme Court composed entirely of Filipinos for the first time since 1901. The new government embarked on an ambitious agenda of establishing the basis for national defense, greater control over the economy, reforms in education, improvement of transport, the colonization of the island of Mindanao, and the promotion of local capital and industrialization. The Commonwealth, however, was also faced with agrarian unrest, an uncertain diplomatic and military situation in Southeast Asia, and uncertainty about the level of United States' commitment to the future of the Republic of the Philippines. Thank you.
Education and the school system. American greatest achievement is the introduction of public school system, in contrast of Spanish system of education. So, yun nga, yung greatest achievement ng mga American ay yung introduce nila yung public school system. At yung school nila ay democratic and it was open to all. And it's based on life here on earth, not unlike Spanish school system. It's based on the idea of life after death. And before, school were only exclusive for the Spaniards. The Filipinos were only able to enter this school in the late 19th century. Tapos, yung mga American, make sure nila na yung church and school are separated. Church had nothing to do with public school system. So, Thomasites, sila yung mga American teacher na pinadala ng United States government para turuan mga Pilipinos to speak English language. Thomasites sent to different provinces. Through that, more middle Filipino knew how to speak English language. So, 1904, first group of Filipinos pensionados sent to United States to study law, medicine, engineering, education, and the other profession, mostly as civil servant in the VRC. So, yung pensionados, ibig sabihin no, scholar. Sila yung first Filipino na pinadala sa United States para mag-aral ng law, medicine, engineering, education, and other profession. Tapos, ito yung example ng pensionados. Okay. So, yun nga, nakapagpadala sila sa ibang bansa sa United States. With that, nag-increase yung public school system dito sa Pilipinas, and also more Filipino know how to read and write. So, here's the example of American school na under sa American. Silliman University, Central Philippines University, University of the Philippines, na alam ko naman na lahat tayo ay alam ang University of the Philippines. Public health and welfare. So, aside from public school system, American other achievement is improvement of health and welfare. 19,000 Filipinos suffer from ravage of smallpox, dysentery, tuberculosis, cholera, malaria, and other deadly diseases. So, American brought proper hygiene to make Filipinos healthy and be free from contagious diseases. And with that, Filipinos learn how to value cleanliness and healthy practices. In 1901, Americans created Board of Public Health na later on naging bureaucracy din siya. So yung ginagawa ng Board of Public Health is to instruct the people in hygiene and sanitation to combat the Philippines' ignorance and superstition, which were the greatest enemy of medicine and public health. Improvement of trade and industry. Free trade between Philippines and United States, which means dumadating yung mga product ng American dito na libre, na no tax, na likewise din sa Philippines na nag-trade tayo sa United States na libre din, or export, which means na ibig sabihin ka ay export. Philippines export to the United States increase. So, noong 1901, yung mga export amounted 6.9 billion pesos. 1910, 1914, mas lalong nag-increase yung in-export natin. To 1914 to 1930, mas lalong nag-increase kasi 2.709 million. So, in industry, Philippines also process under Americans. So, ito yung mga pinapose ng mga Philippines: coconut oils milk, cigar and cigarette factories, rope factories, fishing and fish canning, alcohol distilleries, and sugar central. Religion. Protestantism was introduced. Protestantism was developed in Philippines after Spanish-American War, when the United States acquired the Philippines from the Spanish with the 1898 Treaty of Paris. Protestant Christianity arrived in the Philippines during late and 19th 20th century. American missionaries were mostly responsible for introducing Protestantism. They comprised about 8.2% of the population in 2010. In 1918, more or less than 300,000 Filipinos became Protestant. So, the church and the state government were separated. Freedom of religion was practiced. Transportation and communication. American built roads, street, and bridge for efficient movement of product and services. American also improved the various means of transportation and communication. So here's the example of what American builds. Camden High. So ito. Cannon Road, Burham Park, Manila Dagupan Railway. So as you can see, ito yung ito yung railway na pinagawa ng American. Philippine literature in American period. Many Filipinos started writing again. So, yun na. So, nakalaya na tayo. Yung mga Pilipino, nag-start na silang magsulat ulit. Tapos, yung team nila ay nationalism.
Medium in writing English language. The Philippines writer were appreciated the new style and genres of writing that they brought. During the American period, ang medium ng writing nila is English language, which is na-adapt ng mga Pilipino, especially yung mga writers. In 1920s onward, the genres of poetry, fiction, drama, and essay saw remarkable growth. Under the poetry, have come I'm here in 2 volumes, which is sinulat ni Jose Garciavilla. Jose Garciavilla was a Philippine poet and short story writer. Was an award-winning poet in both the Philippines and the United States. In 1973, he became the first Philippine writer in English to be declared a national artist, earning a lifetime pension. So during 1920s, ang mga genres ng poetry, fiction, drama, and essay ang nag-boom. Under the poetry is Have Come on I'm Here ni Jose Garciavilla. The first Philippine novel English was Zoilos Galang, A Child of Sorrow, which was published in 1921. The first Filipino novel in English and A Box of Ashes and Other Stories in 1925. The first collection of stories in the book form, Villa's Footnote to Youth and Tales of the Philippines and Others in 1933. Under 1921, The Child of Sorrow is na-publish at ang sumulat ay si Zoilos Galang, the first Philippine novel in English. The first successful Philippine short story in English is The Death Stars by Paz Marquez Benitez in 1925. During her career as a writer, Paz Marquez Benitez wrote short stories critical of American imperialism. Paz is most known by her short story Death Stars, in 1925, in which the two main characters are displayed as allegories to American imperialism in order to portray the slow decay of Philippine heritage. In 1925 naman, the first successful Philippine short story sa English is Death Stars, sinulat ni Paz Marquez Benitez. The three former UP presidents had legacies of excellent drama writing: Carlos P. Romulos, George Bocobo, Vidal Tan. Kay Carlos P. Romulo naman is Son of Sail, The Ghost, and The Real Reader. Carlos Peña Romulo was a Filipino diplomat, statesman, soldier, journalist, and author. He was a reporter at 16, a newspaper editor by the age of 20, and a publisher at the age of 32. George Bocobo, who translated Dr. Jose Rizal's No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo into English, was born in Gerona, Tarlac. Bocobo, who got an almost perfect score in civil law examination in the country, also translated the Code of Calintao, Lupang Hinirang, and Andres Bonifacio's Decalogue. Vidal Tan, The Meeting in the Town Hall and Souls in Tournament. Vidal Lorenzo Tan was born on March 23, 1920, the only child of Dr. Vidal A. Tan and Teresita Yulo Tan. He was educated at Ateneo degree where he graduated at summa cum laude. Wilfredo Maria Guerrero, the great in Philippine literature, highly prolific writer, 100 plays are credited. He helped the Philippine theater scene reach new heights. Condemned, Women Are Extraordinary, and Forever. So si Wilfredo Maria Guerrero, meron siyang 100 plays credited. And ang ilan sa mga sinulat niya ay Condemned, Women Are Extraordinary, and Forever. Wilfredo Maria Guerrero was a Filipino playwright, director, teacher, and theater artist. Guerrero wrote well over 100 plays, 41 of which had been published. His unpublished plays have either been broadcast over the radio or staged in previous parts of the Philippines. Literacy and criticism. Manuel A. Viray was among the most notable critics aside being a poet and fictionist himself. So under the literary and criticism, si Manuel A. Viray ang most notable critics. At aside from being a poet, siya rin ay fictionist himself. Changes in the Philippine culture during American period.
Changes in the Philippines culture during American period. Entertainment, music, and dance. Naging sikat sa bansa ang mga Hollywood movies. Nauso din ang mga music kagaya ng rock and roll at mga sayaw na kagaya ng boogies, jazz, tango, cha-cha, at iba pa. Nakakapanood na rin ang mga Pilipino ng mga larong kagaya ng table tennis, basketball, volleyball, boxing, at football. Mode of dressing was changed. Pagdating naman sa pananamit, natutunan ng mga Pinay ang pagsusot ng mga high-heeled na sapatos, mga dresses o bestida, at pagdadala ng handbags. while ang mga Pinoy naman ay natutong magsuot ng mga suits o Americana, mga polo shirts, kurbata, at maong na pantalon. Ayan yung pananamit ng Pinay at Pinoy during American period. Naipagkilala rin ng mga Amerikano ang pagkain kagaya ng ice cream, cakes, beef steak, hot dogs, hamburgers, sandwich, cookies, at donuts. Pati na rin ang mga arkitektong Amerika na ay makikita pa rin kagaya ng UP, PNU, Manila Hotel, at PGH. Ginawa rin nila ang mga boulevards, zone district, mga street, at mga centers of pleasure. Ano nga ba ang mga center of pleasure? Ito yung mga parke o mga sinihan kung saan pwedeng mag-relax. At ang boulevard ay isang malawak na kalsada na ang uugnay sa mga sentro ng bayan. Ayan yung American architecture, yung Philippine Normal University PNU campus. Pagdating naman dito, natuto ang mga Pilipino na maging prangka sa pagsasalita, palabiro, at nagkaroon ng paniniwala at pakikipaglaban para sa karapatan at kalayaan. At nagkaroon na rin sila ng pagkahilig sa sports. Ito ay impluwensya ng mga Amerikano, pati na rin ang pagkikipagsosyalan ay natutunan sa kanila. Sa katunayan, ang pagmamano ay napalitan ng paghalik sa pisngi bilang tanda ng respeto, pero hindi naman lubusang nawala ang pagmamano. The negative impact of American colonization. Americanization of the Filipinos. Ito yung naging parang mga Amerikano ang mga Pinoy, mas tinangkilik nila ang mga imported goods kaysa sa ating sariling gawa. At maging ngayon naman, mas gusto natin ang imported. Colonial mentality. Ito yung tingin natin na mas magaganda ang gawa ng mga Amerikano o ng ibang bansa, nawalan tayo ng tiwala sa sarili nating kakayahan. Dahil dito, nakalimutan natin ang ating sariling kultura. Noon okay na sa atin ang mga bibingka o kaya suman. Ngayon basta karawan dapat cake. Ang bibingka ay tuwing Pasko na lang. Dati suman at kakanin lang, pero ngayon dapat donuts o hotdogs na. Dahil sa pagkikipaggaya natin sa mga Amerikano, unti-unti natin napapalitan ang pagmamano ng cheek-to-cheek o paghalik sa pisngi o pagsasabi ng hi or hello. Sa katunayan, ang pagmamano ay halos nakikita na lamang sa probinsya. Meron din naman nagmamano at sinasabayan ng paghalik sa pisngi ay ginawa lamang natin sa mga Amerikano. Ang mga native na pagkain natin kagaya ng mga kakanin, suman o bibingka ay napalitan ng mga American foods kagaya ng hotdogs, hamburgers, fries at iba pa. Unti-unting nawawala ang ating Filipino identity. Naging dependent tayo sa mga Amerikano. Mas binibigyan ng halaga ang kulturang Amerikano kaysa sa kulturang Pilipino. Makikita naman na minsan mas kilala pa natin ang mga Amerikano kaysa sa mga bayani nating Pilipino. Sa madaling salita, dahil sa impluensya ng mga Amerikano sa atin, unti-unti nawawala ang ating sariling identity bilang mga Pilipino. The Commonwealth and World War II. Japanese plans. Ano nga ba ang plano ng Japan sa pagsasakop sa Pilipinas? Ang planong pagsasakop sa Pilipinas ay bahagi ng kanilang plano sa tinatawag na Great East Asia War sa pagnanais ng Japan na palawakin ang kanilang imperyo. May 3 objectives ng Japan sa pananakop sa Pilipinas. Yung una, prevent use of Philippines as an advanced base of American forces. Ito yung parang hindi magamit ng mga Amerikano ang Pilipinas bilang kanilang base militar. Sa ganitong paraan, mahihirapan ang Amerika na pasukin ang Japan dahil sa layo nito. Pangalawa, to acquire staging areas and supply bases to enhance operations. Gagamitin ng Japan ang Pilipinas bilang staging area kung saan magiging imbakan nila ng mga supplies kagaya ng armas para sa kanilang operation. At panghuli, to secure communication lines from Japanese home islands. Dahil sa lapit ng Pilipinas sa Japan, mga masecure at mapadali ang kanilang komunikasyon sa Japan. Wala pa naman kasing mga satellite at cellphone noon. Two-way radyo lang na limitado ang lawak ng coverage. Japanese invasion. Mabilisan ang naging pagsasakop ng Japan sa Pilipinas. 10 oras bagong bombahin nila ang Pearl Harbor noong December 8, 1941. Binomba ng mga Hapon ang Pilipinas at kasabay nila ang pagpasok ng kanilang mga sundalo sa bansa. Aftermath. Ang pagkikipaglaban ng mga Pilipino at mga Amerikano ay umabot ng halos 3 buwan. Nasa 1 milyon na Pilipino ang namatay sa digmaang ito. At halos walang-wala natira sa Manila dahil sa giyera at maging ibang bahagi ng bansa. Ang kagitingan ng mga sundalong Amerikano at Pilipino ay ipinagdiriwang natin tuwing April 9.
Commonwealth of the Philippines. The Commonwealth was the culmination of efforts to secure a definitive timetable for the withdrawal of American sovereignty over the Philippines. Sa simula ng pananakop ng Amerikano, ang Estados Unidos ay nagtataguyod ng mga lokal na pamahalaan na may mga lokal na hinihalal na opisyal ng bayan at panlalawigan. Pagkatapos ay dumating ang isang unti-unting pagpapalawak ng pabansang pampatasang representasyon nagsimula sa Philippine Assembly o Mababang Kapulungan noong 1907. U.S. Defenses. The mission of the Department of Defense is to provide through its military strength a solid foundation for the national police of the United States. The forerunner of the Department of Defense, the National Military Establishment, was created by the National Security Act of 1947 and evolved from the experience of World War II. Habang ang mga sangkap ng labanan at serbisyo ng kagawaran ng Army at Navy ay sama-sama na nakikipaglaban sa mga iba't ibang bansa ng operasyon sa ilalim ng pinag-iisang direksyon ng mga commander sa ibang bansa. Ang mga individual na departamento ng militar ay hiwalay na nag-uulat sa Pangulo. Ang magkasalungat at makapagkompetensyang mga patakaran ng mga kagawaran na ito ay pumigil sa tunay na mabisa, pinagugnay at pinag-iisang pagsisikap militar upang mapagtagumpayan ang kakulangan. Sa pagsamahang ito, nilikha ang National Military Establishment at itinaguyod ang cabinet post kalihim ng depensa upang maibigay ang pangkalahatang patakaran at direksyon ng mga kagawarang militar nang hindi sinisira ang kanilang individual na pagkakakilanlan. Kasabay nito, ang Air Force ay nilikha bilang isang pangatlong kagawaran ng militar sa isang co-equal na batayan sa mga kagawaran ng Army at Navy. Okay, United States Army Force in the Far East. Isang utos militar na binubuo ng US sa Pilipinas noong ikalawang digmaan pandaigdig upang labanan ang banta ng mga imperialistang sundalong Hapon. Ito ay binubuo ng pwersang Pilipino at Amerikano na magtatanggol sa US. At ang itinalagang leader nito ay si General Douglas o MacArthur. Mobilization. Ang pagpapakilos ay isang kilos ng pagtitipon at paghahanda ng mga tropang militar at mga gamit para sa gera. Ang salitang mobilisasyon ay unang ginamit sa isang konteksto ng militar noong 1850s upang ilarawan ang paghahanda ng Prussian Army. Ang mga teorya at taktitay ng pagpapakilos ay patuloy na nagbabago mula noon. Defeat and retreat. The more one is defeated, the more courageous one is. In the first 2 months of 1938, China drew its breath and tired to come to terms with the horror losses of late 1937. Mayroong laganap na pag-asa sa mga dayuhang tagamasid ng mga gobyerno sa wakas ay susuko sa Japan si Chiang Kai-shek, ang lalaking malapit na naiugnay sa pagkatalo, ay napipilitang magbitaw. Hindi nangyayari ang alinmang pinag-isa ang mga Hapones at China. Ang propaganda ng kanyang mga bomba at mas higit na mga nangingibabaw na pag-uugali ng kanyang mga sundalo ang naging mas epekto sa pagtatanim ng puot sa lahat ng bagay na Hapon, sa lahat ng mga klase mula sa hindi marunong bumasa, sumulat, paitaas. Ang United China ay nangangailangan ng isang pinuno at ang magagamit lamang ay si Chiang. Hinawakan niya ang kanyang posisyon, bagamat ang kanyang estilo ay otokratiko ay malubhang na cartrade. Ang kulturang pampolitika ay namumulak sa Wuhan at walang ulirat at malikhain, marahil ang pinakamalakas na alam ng China. Philippines. Ang pamayanan ng mga Amerikano sa Pilipinas ay nagsimula noong panahon ng kolonyal ng Espanya noong 2005. Tinantiya ng kagawaran ng Estado ng Estados Unidos na mayroong higit sa 220,000 na mga mamayan Estados Unidos na nakatira sa Pilipinas na may iisang makabuluhang halo-halong populasyon ng mga Amerikano at mga inapaw mula rin sa mga panahon ng kolonyal. Philippine Resistance. Sa panahon ng pananakop ng mga Hapon sa mga isla sa World War II, nagkaroon ng malawak na kilusang paglaban ng Pilipinas na kinontra ng Hapon at kanilang mga katuwang sa aktibong aktibidad sa ilalim ng lupa at giyera na tumaas sa mga nakaraang taon.